Well, the latest is, we signed and contracted to do a rematch, and that's what it is right now.
Do you know when it's going to be, when we can hear?
I don't got no date right now, but I know that's the next fight that Terence Crawford.
How long do you think it will be before we have some news about that?
I don't know. It's still up in the air, given
First male boxer, undisputed, in any division in a 4-belt era, and I honor, that, and if he was to come to me or activate his.
I mean, it could happen. I mean, why not? If Crawford want to challenge himself to be great, let him try to be great. So what I'm saying, I'm with it. So I'll be going for Bud. If he fight Canelo, I'll be going for him.
The sport of boxing is once again in a state of chaos, and this time, it seems like the tension between two of the sport's brightest stars, Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., is about to reach a fever pitch. Just when it seemed like their paths had permanently diverged after their first showdown in 2023, discussions of a rematch have suddenly come to the forefront as of April 2025. What was once seen as an afterthought is now rapidly becoming a reality. And it's not just idle speculation or unfounded rumors. Behind the scenes, negotiations are taking place, and both fighters are openly talking about it. Tensions are growing, and the sports world is eagerly watching as this developing drama unfolds. Crawford and Spence were once considered the two greatest welterweights of their generation, and when they stepped into the ring in July 2023, their fight was expected to be a historic battle for supremacy in the division. The anticipation was sky high, as fans debated who had the edge, who would come out on top, and who would stake their claim as the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. What transpired in that fight, however, completely upended those expectations, with Crawford delivering a decisive victory that stunned the boxing community. But now, just as it seemed like their rivalry had run its course and both fighters had moved on, the idea of a rematch is back in play. Crawford has made his stance clear in recent months. He's not shying away from Spence, but he's not ready to give up his hard-earned advantage without a fight. And Spence? He's determined to get another shot at Crawford, convinced that the first fight didn't truly reflect his abilities. The backdrop of their rivalry is now one of heated exchanges, high-stakes negotiations, and the looming question of whether or not they'll face off once more. As we dive into the story behind this dramatic turn of events, it's crucial to take a step back and reflect on how we got here, what's at stake, and why this rematch is so important for both of these elite fighters.
I wanted to see that immediately after that fight, but now time has kind of ran its course. I don't want to see Errol. I just don't want to see Errol be done like that. That's all. And I believe Errol Spence is a generational talent, great fighter.
Intro 2. Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. have never been the types to hold their tongues. And now that talks of a rematch are heating up, the war of words between the two has escalated to new heights. Their rivalry has always been marked by intense animosity and mutual respect, but as negotiations for a second fight come into focus, the tone has become far more personal and aggressive. Crawford and Spence have both taken to social media, interviews, and public exchanges to throw verbal jabs at one another. The build-up to a potential rematch has been accompanied by fierce rhetoric, with both fighters making their case as to why they should be considered the best. But as the talk turns into more than just banter, it's clear that both men have a lot on the line. Spence, who has been out of the ring since his devastating loss to Crawford in 2023, has made no secret of the fact that he's eager to get back into the ring with his rival. After all, he didn't lose simply because Crawford was the better fighter. At least, that's how he sees it. Spence insists that the first fight didn't represent his true self, claiming that he was drained and struggling to make weight at 147 pounds. In his mind, the weight cut took everything out of him, leaving him physically compromised when the bell rang. He believes that had he been able to fight at a higher weight, he would have been able to compete on an equal level with Crawford and possibly even win. To him, the first fight wasn't the real Spence, and a rematch at 154 pounds would level the playing field. Crawford, however, isn't buying into that narrative. He remembers exactly what happened the last time they fought, how he knocked Spence down 3 times, dominated the action, and left little doubt as to who the better fighter was. In Crawford's mind, the outcome of the first fight wasn't a fluke. it was a clear display of his superior skill and preparation. He believes that Spence is simply trying to make excuses for his loss, and he's not interested in giving him any advantage in a potential rematch. To Crawford, the idea of fighting Spence at 154 pounds isn't a fair request. It's an attempt to tilt the scales in Spence's favor. After all, Crawford's victory was decisive, and he sees no reason to cater to Spence's demands. The trash talk, as expected, has reached new levels. Spence has called Crawford out at every available opportunity, insisting that he deserves a second chance. Crawford, meanwhile, remains confident and unapologetic, sticking to his stance that he won the first fight fair and square. The verbal warfare has become as intense as the potential fight itself, with both fighters refusing to back down.
It can't be made, but weight can be used as an excuse and sort of say, I don't feel like it. Like, I'll go up for this guy, but not another guy. So, that's sort of the spirit. The language is very, more precise and very definitive. But the concept is, out of fairness, is, let's not be selective.
Intro 3. The saga of the rematch between Crawford and Spence has been anything but straightforward. The seeds for this drama were planted the moment Spence exercised the rematch clause in the contract after their first fight, which ended in a one-sided victory for Crawford. When Spence triggered the clause, it was clear that he wasn't accepting the loss as a permanent part of his legacy. He wanted another shot at Crawford, a chance to rewrite history and prove that he could be the one to reign supreme in the welterweight division. But the contract had one important stipulation. Unless either fighter officially declared they couldn't make the 147 pounds weight limit, the rematch would take place at welterweight. Despite Spence's insistence that the weight cut was the reason for his poor performance, he never submitted the official notice required to move the fight up to 154 pounds. He and his team, however, kept pushing for the rematch to be contested at the higher weight class, a demand that Crawford was unwilling to accommodate. For Crawford, there was no reason to give Spence any further advantages after he had dominated him so thoroughly in their first bout. Crawford was firmly committed to the idea that the fight should happen at 147 pounds, the same weight class where they first fought and where he had bested Spence without question. A standoff ensued, with Spence's team pushing for 154 pounds and Crawford refusing to compromise. As time went on, the situation grew more complicated, and fans began to wonder whether the rematch would ever come to fruition. The two sides were at an impasse, with no resolution in sight. Meanwhile, both fighters had other things to focus on. Crawford continued his ascent, capturing additional titles in the sport, while Spence dealt with his own personal and professional challenges.
But you gonna knock my first?
Because I don't want to personally. We talking about what we want to see. I don't want to see it because I know what it's gonna look like. The same as it looked last time.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Errol Spence wasn't the same.
What was wrong with him?
He looked slow. He looked he looked sluggish.
Why?
I can't tell you. I wasn't in camp.
At the division, he dominated for his entire career. All of a sudden, when it came time for this fight, he looked different. Why?
I wasn't in camp with him. I can't tell you. I don't know if his body finally broke down for being at 147 for too long.
Then, just as the rematch seemed like it was slipping further out of reach, Spence's health issues added another layer of uncertainty to the equation. After suffering a devastating loss to Crawford, Spence needed to undergo eye surgery to address lingering concerns about his vision, which had been a factor leading into the fight. The recovery process was long and arduous, leaving many wondering whether Spence would ever return to the form that made him one of the top fighters in the world. With Spence focused on his health and unsure of his future in the ring, Crawford moved forward with his career. While Spence was sidelined, Crawford continued to dominate, winning another title at 154 pounds by defeating Israel Madrimov. He had already proven his supremacy at welterweight, and now he was proving his worth at a higher weight class. When reporters asked Crawford about a possible rematch with Spence, he gave a cold and dismissive response. Nah. At that moment, it appeared that the rivalry between the two had come to a definitive end. Crawford had moved on, and Spence's future in the sport was uncertain at best.
I truly believe that the fight would have went that way regardless, because stylistically, the fundamentals on that level, Crawford is just outclasses Errol Spence in every single category.
But now the tides have begun to shift. Crawford is no longer dismissing the idea of a rematch entirely. While he's still firm in his belief that he won the first fight decisively, he's not closing the door on a second encounter with Spence. Spence, on the other hand, is increasing the pressure, calling out Crawford at every opportunity, challenging him to settle the score once and for all. As the talks continue, the debate among fans has intensified. Many believe that Spence deserves another shot at Crawford, with some arguing that the weight cut for the first fight was a significant factor in Spence's performance. They believe that if Spence were allowed to fight at 154 pounds, he would be able to compete on a more level playing field with Crawford and possibly even win. To them, the first fight was an anomaly, a result of external factors rather than a true reflection of Spence's abilities. Others, however, are not so convinced. They argue that Spence is simply making excuses for his loss, and that the first fight was a clear display of Crawford's dominance. These fans believe that a rematch would likely unfold in much the same way, with Crawford emerging victorious once again, regardless of the weight class. The debate continues to rage on, and with each passing day, the anticipation grows. The rivalry between Crawford and Spence is far from over, and the prospect of a rematch is once again very much alive. As both fighters continue to push for a showdown, the entire boxing world is waiting to see if the fight will actually happen, and if so, who will come out on top.